Hello, and welcome to the Gravel Ride podcast, where we go deep on the sport of gravel cycling through in-depth interviews with product designers, event organizers, and athletes who are pioneering the sport. I'm your host, Craig Dalton, a lifelong cyclist who discovered gravel cycling back in 2016 and made all the mistakes you don't need to make. I approach each episode as a beginner to unlock all the knowledge you need to become a great gravel cyclist. Have you ever thought about organizing a gravel event? I certainly have. This week's guest, Fabian Serralta, took that passion and idea to create an event and created Gravel Locos. The original event in Hico, Texas is joined this year by a new event in Pueblo, Colorado. I sat down with Fabian to learn about his inspiration for Gravel Locos, the charitable component of what he does, and the general theme of all Gravel Locos events. Before we jump into the conversation, I need to thank this week's sponsor, Hammerhead. The Hammerhead Karoo 2 has raised the bar for cycling computers. You can get advanced GPS navigation and intuitive software right on your handlebars in a way you never thought possible. I spent this past weekend down in Tucson, Arizona. After speaking with John from the Mount Lemon Gravel Grinder a few years back, I've been itching to get out on the course, so I simply downloaded the GPS file from their website, uploaded it to my Karoo 2, and felt super confident going out there in the backcountry. I've got a ton of stories about some of the snafus I had, mechanically speaking, while I was out there. But from a navigational perspective, it was spot on. What I really appreciate about the Karoo 2, and I've talked about the responsive touchscreen display before, is that in the navigation, once you've loaded a route in there, you get a little icon, no matter what screen you're on, saying when the next turn is coming up. It's those little touches and details that I think really setting the Hammerhead Karoo 2 apart. Beyond that, I really got to dive into the climber feature, which is something unique and special about Hammerhead. The climber feature allows you to visualize and prepare for upcoming gradient changes in real time. So what does that mean? Basically, it translates to a nice graph on the climber screen on your Karoo 2 computer that shows you in color-coded fashion the length to the top of the climb, both in miles as well as elevation, and then gradient by gradient profile looks that map exactly to what you're experiencing. When you're out on an adventure loop that you've never been on before, it was super useful to see, okay, this is going to be a punchy mile and a half climb, versus at the end, I discovered as I turned a corner that I was in front of a 6-mile climb. But fortunately, the gradient was pretty chill. This all translates to knowledge as power. And with the Hammerhead Karoo 2, you can get all the information available out of your GPX files. You can customize it to the nth degree. I still have a ways to go in customizing mine, but you can see the power of organizing your data right there on your computer screen. For a limited time, our listeners can get a free custom color kit and exclusive premium water bottle with the purchase of a Hammerhead Karoo 2. Visit hammerhead.io right now and use the promo code TheGravelRide at checkout to get yours today. That's a free custom color kit and a premium water bottle with the purchase of a Karoo 2. Go to hammerhead.io, add all 3 items to your cart, and use the promo code TheGravelRide. With that said, let's jump right into my interview with Fabian from Gravel Locos. Fabian, welcome to the show.
Hey, Craig. Thank you.
It's good to talk to you again.
Same here. Thank you.
I'm excited to learn all the things about Gravel Locos, but would love to learn a little bit about your background first. Just kind of what drew you into the sport originally, and then what led you to take on the huge challenge of creating an event?
Well, I would definitely say I was probably, what led me to the sport was purely accidental. I purchased a ranch in Oklahoma in 2012. And I remember the first time driving out there to see this ranch with I was following a realtor, and we're in this perfectly smooth country road. And I was just thinking, this is great. I'm going to have my road bike out here. And as soon as we get to the one road that leads to the ranch, it was this awful road with rocks and gravel and dirt. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I'm not going to be able to ride my road bike out here. And then we're on this road, and this lady is just like flying on this road, and just dust and dirt everywhere. And then we're just flying on this road. And it was like a 15-mile drive on this awful gravel dirt road to the driveway of this ranch that I had just purchased. and or I was about to purchase. And then the driveway from this road to the ranch was another mile and a half. And when we get to the ranch property and the house, I said to her, "This is terrible. I'm not going to be able to ride my bike when I'm out here." She's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "I'll get a flat tire by the time I get to to the main road." And she's like, "Well, you can just drive your bike in your car and go out there and just park out there." I'm like, "Where am I going to park? That's like somebody else's property out there." So this is 2012, and so I buy this property, and probably from 2012, 2013 until about 2015, I didn't get to ride my road bike every time that I went out there.
Yeah, I was gonna say there wasn't a lot of options
Yeah,
for in terms of gravel bikes at that point in time.
no. But then in 2015, I'm visiting my son in Denver. He was going to school at the University of Denver, and I just happened to go to a bike store. It was, I believe, it was a Specialized bike store. And I walk in there, and there's this white and red bike with SRAM, and it looked like a road bike, and it had these knobby tires on it and zip wheels. And I'm like, "What in the world is this thing?" And the sales guy comes up to me. I'm like, "What is this thing?" And he's looking at me like, he's like, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "Well, I'm from Cuba." And he's probably thinking this guy just fell off of a coconut palm or something. He's like, "It's a cross bike." I'm like, "What's a cross bike?" I had no idea what a cross. He's like, "You don't know what a cross bike is?" I'm like, "I don't know, but I want that bike." He's like, "Well, you going to do cyclocross?" I'm like, "No, I bought this ranch and it has these horrible roads that are rocks." And he's like, "Oh, so you want a gravel bike?" I'm like, "A gravel bike?" I said, "No, I want that bike and I need you to ship it to Texas." And the guy is just like looking at me like I'm nuts. But it was like, it looked like a road bike and it had, what looked like to be mountain bike tires. And I'm like, "This is it." So I purchased the bike, and it happened to be on my size, a 54 centimeter. They ship it to Texas to my local bike shop, and it gets over there. They had 700 by 33C tires, and I start riding it in Oklahoma, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And I was running 90 psi on the tires, which I thought at the time was perfect because on my tubular road tires I was running 120 psi. And so I thought this thing was just as smooth as can be on these gravel roads. And I signed up for my first gravel event, October 1st, 2016. And I thought, hey, it was 15 miles, no big deal. I showed up. At the time, I think I had 95 psi in the rear and 90 in the front. And I thought it was going to be very much like a road rally where you have, rest stops every so many miles. And so I think I had 2 water bottles and maybe one snack or whatever. And man, it was a nightmare.
Was that in Oklahoma, the event that you signed up for?
It was a really hilly area, Munster, Texas. And, I paid my registration fee, which I think it was, I don't know, $85, $90. And I was expecting it to be just like many of the road rallies I had done. And, rest stops with bananas and oranges and cookies and pickle juice and Gatorade. And there was nothing. All they had was a water table with warm water, no food. And by the end of the 50 miles, I thought I was going to die. And with that tire pressure on those 33C tires, I was so beat up. I swear I'll never do this again. I remember getting to the finish and calling some buddies. I'm like, "I am never doing this again. This is horrible. Why would anybody ever do this?"
Yeah,
But
it's funny what a difference
that's,
the evolution of the equipment has made in the enjoyment of the sport. I'm
yes.
with you. I got my first gravel bike a little bit later than you, I think back in 2016, but it was a 2014 model year bike, 32C tires.
Jeez.
Fortunately, it did have tubeless on it, but it's still like, I just felt like it wasn't that much better than a cyclocross bike I had 5 or 6 years earlier, which I had pretty much quit riding because I would either flat or get the crap beat out of me every time I rode it.
Yeah, this thing. I mean, it was a cyclocross bike. It was Specialized Crux. I mean, it had great. I mean, it had zip 303s. I was running tubes, and which was a big difference from running tubulars on my other bikes, road bikes, and it had SRAM. I couldn't complain. It was a great bike,
Yeah.
but I was just running the wrong tire pressure, the wrong tire size, and I really didn't have any knowledge of gravel. But I did see other people running bigger tires and all that, and it was just this learning curve. But that first experience was horrible, and really, I swore I'd never do this again. And it took a while. And then I started learning from others like, hey, yeah, you can't be out there running tire pressure like that. And you can't, you got to run bigger tires than that. And you got to run, tubeless. And it probably took me a couple of months before I even rode again. But as I started getting more and more advice from others that were doing it, but it was so early on, but it was that experience that really led me to want to have eventually one day have a gravel event that was a lot like a road rally, but that it was also, it had it was at the time it was, the Dirty Can event, the DK 200. So I wanted to have a DK 200 event with the pro component, but yet beginner friendly. So have all the support that you would need for beginners like myself or people just really interested in gravel. So having all the bunch of rest stops and having portable bathrooms at rest stops for the women and having SAG vehicles all over the place, but yet having a ton of pros. So having an event that was a DK 200 packed with pros, but yet packed with all the support and all the things that you are accustomed to experiencing and having at a, family road rally type event.
Interesting. So it sounds like, I mean, if we fast forward a few years from that original event,
Yes.
It sounds like you competed in a handful of events every year to try to, obviously continue your enjoyment of the sport. The equipment had continued to evolve, and you'd had a number of experiences at other events where you're like, I like part of what this event has done, but part of what that event has done.
Yes.
And you thought, well, like, what if I did this on my own?
Yeah, like so. The events continue. I would go to every gravel event that I could go to, but it was you pay your 75, 85, 100 something dollars, but you're lucky if you got a water table, and everything was always self-supported, and you're paying all this money, but you're not really getting a whole lot in return. And to me, it really excluded a lot of beginners. It excluded people that didn't have a lot of bike skills or bike mechanic knowledge, because I always say what makes riding gravel so great is that you're out in the middle of nowhere, but that's also what makes it kind of dangerous and also kind of keeps a lot of people out of it, because you're out in the middle of nowhere. You don't have cell reception, you don't have convenience stores, oftentimes you don't have many houses, or you don't see a vehicle, or cars don't even come by half the time. So yeah, you're out there in the middle of nowhere, but then you don't have the help of neighbors, and you don't have convenience stores, and you don't have others to reach out to in case of an emergency or mechanical. And I feel that deters a lot of people from venturing and experiencing gravel. And as a result, a lot of people miss out on experiencing gravel. So how do you bring in all those people? And for me, is the way to do that is by bringing in all the support, the SAG vehicles, aid stations every so many miles. So for example, in Gravel Locos, you have 6 aid stations. You have 20 something SAG vehicles. For the women, we have portable bathrooms at all the aid stations, whether it's in Hico or in Pueblo, Colorado. And that's how we take out that fear of being out there in the middle of nowhere. So, but yet we still have 20 something 30 pros out there participating, just like we did at events like Dirty Kansas 200, or what was Land Run, and I refer to them by those names because that's what I was modeling back then.
I'm glad we unearthed that, because I think it's important to kind of think about people's orientations as event organizers in terms of how they're going to set up the overall experience. It's one thing when you've got a top level pro who's decided they want to get into the event business. And oftentimes they do design events that are driven from the front. They're really a professional athlete experience that does trickle down to the rest of us. But it's, it's pretty refreshing to hear you talk about wanting the last person in the event to have the best time possible, as well as the first. So stepping back for a second, you live in Arlington, Texas. You've got property in Oklahoma. You'd experienced the gravel community for a number of years. You decided, hey, there's something missing. I'd love to highlight my perspective of a gravel event. How did you decide on Texas for the original event? And what was that process like?
Well, I decided in Texas because that's where I predominantly ride. So I've done a lot of gravel riding. I've done gravel in California. I've done gravel in Vermont, in Montana. I've done gravel in Scotland. I've done gravel in other parts, but Texas is where I mostly ride gravel. And I've done gravel all over Texas. And Hico, I remember riding gravel and close to Hico. And one of the folks that I was riding with says, "Man, if you like this area, you've got to check out Hico." So I said, "Hico, where's that?" So I found it, went out there, and
And where is it relative to the Dallas area?
for me, it's about an hour and 20-minute drive from
And is
Arlington.
that to the east or
Oh,
which
man.
direction?
I'm the guy that gets lost with Garmin, so so I'm going to take a chance here and say I think it's south.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm horrible. I'm like directionally challenged. So I get asked this all the time. Like the other day, I was in Pueblo for meetings, and I was meeting with the PBR, the folks for the Professional Bull Riding Association, which are one of our sponsors, and they were asking me, "So which direction?" I said, "I have no idea. Here's the route. You figure it out." I mean, really, I do get lost even with Garmin. I'm that guy that I'm following the route, and I always end up with more mileage. So I ended up going out to Hico, and I follow this route, and it had so much more climbing. Even though I am not built like a climber, I love as these challenging routes. I really love taking on routes that have as much climbing as possible. And even though it takes me all stinking day, and Hico has that, for Texas as one of these areas that you get so much climbing. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And Hico it's hard packed, and it has a lot of beautiful canopy areas, like canopy tree areas. It has lots of water crossings. It has, it's just a really diverse terrain. And even if it were to rain, it's so hard packed. It's got a lot of smooth areas. There's really nothing rough or nasty about it. And even if it rains, it's not an area that you get much mud, much more than a couple inches of mud. So it's not like mid south where you have 6 inches, 12 inches of mud in your foot, is foot into the mud. For example, last year in May, it did rain, and so yeah, people got muddy, but you're talking an inch of mud, 2 inches of mud, maybe 2.5. So it's not a situation that you're just bogged down and you have to walk. You can ride through it. So it's really an area that you can ride it all year long, rain or shine. And it was just perfect. And I said, "This is it. We're going to do it here." So, last year we had 3 routes. This year we have 4 routes. Last year we had a 30 miler, a 60, and 150 something. And after our survey of the event, it was a very positive survey. Folks were just absolutely thrilled with the event. But what kept coming up was, have a 100 miler. So I said, all right. So for 2022, we have a 100 miler as well. And it just filled up immediately. So folks really wanted 100. Not everybody wants to do 150 something miles, but they want it more than a 60 miler. So the 100 miles, I never even thought of it. So you learn. I've learned a lot.
I feel like I'm in that category where 150 mile, maybe I can muster that up once a year if I'm lucky, but 100 keeps me honest. I need to train for that pretty well, but yes. I believe in my heart, like I can always uncork 100 miles if I'm like relatively fit.
Yeah. And, and the 100 miler, it's a legit route. I mean, it's over 5,000 feet of climbing, and it's really a beautiful route. And it really incorporates all the hard climbs that are in the 150 something mile.
One of the things I always want to unpack with event organizers, because I think it is a challenge depending on where you are, is okay, so you've decided on Hico as a great riding location, but there are also logistics and permits and all kinds of things you need to go through. Granted, in a rural community, maybe those are less than a more populous community, but you still need to do that. So what was that process? What was that process like for you?
Really easy. What I have learned with, this is for me as a hobby, and Hico has, it's really been incredibly easy. They've really taken care of all that for me. And I went in there with, the understanding that, look, I'm doing this to help the volunteer fire departments. If you're willing to help me, I'm willing to do it.
And was that perspective something that was already in your head? Hey, I want to have a charitable component to the event I put on?
Yes. And if you're willing to work with me and take care of these things, I'm willing to do it. If you're not willing to work with me, I'm out of here. It's just, it's one of those things that I don't have the time to mess with all that stuff. So if the town is willing, then I'm willing. If they want to put me through all these hoops and things and barricades and all this red tape, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
because I just don't have time for it. I've got 4 kids and 2 other businesses to run. And so I was really upfront, and they were really honest about it. And they facilitated everything that I needed. They provide all the things that I need. They provide law enforcement. They provide crowd control and barricades, and they provide everything. The same thing with Pueblo.
There
They're
was
just happy.
hike in the original Gravel Locos event. Sorry to interrupt you there, Fabian. It took off through the gravel cycling community as a event option incredibly quickly. And there was a couple of things that kind of at least caught my eye right off the bat, which were, one was, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seemed like the registration was entirely a donation based model,
Yes.
which was
Yeah.
unheard of. And two, for a first year event, you had all these top pros saying, I'm
Yes.
going to be there.
Yes.
How did both of those things happen?
Well, it was out of really. So the event was initially going to take place in 2020 in November, and I canceled it because of COVID. So I had the green light from Hico, but I canceled it because of COVID. Basically, I have absolutely zero connections in the bike industry, and what I tried to do was try and get the bike industry on board, and the only way that I could do that was reaching out to them via Instagram and Facebook, and that really didn't really work. I couldn't get anybody to return any messages or anything, despite the amount of money that I spent on bikes. I have the record at my local bike shop for spending the most money on bicycles every year. It's absurd. Despite all that, I couldn't get a response from anybody. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to let that discourage me. I'm going to have this event with or without the bike industry. And so I said, I'll fund it. I'll do it myself, because I'm going to have this event, and this event is going to have the component of the pros and the component of the beginners, and there isn't going to be a cutoff. So if folks are going to train for the GL 150, 150 something miles with over 8,000 feet of elevation gain, I'm not going to yank them off the course. They're going to be out there as long as they want to be. And if they want to give up, they're going to give up. But it's not going to be, I'm not going to take it away from anybody. I'm not going to be that person that's going to say, hey, you know what? You didn't make the cutoff by 10 minutes or an hour or 2 hours and you're off the course. Because I'm always that person who's the last one. And, when I was at Ted's event in Vermont last year, I didn't make the cutoff. And when they came up to me and they said, hey, look, you didn't make the cutoff, I said, we're going to have a freaking fight. And I said, call Ted. And they did. They called Ted. And Ted's like, leave him alone. He's fine. I'll take care of him. I'll wait for him. And Ted did. And he understands. He waited out there for me. And I didn't make the cutoff by over an hour. And he was out there in the rain, in the cold, waiting for me. Everybody was gone. The whole thing was shut down. And he followed me for like the last 15 miles because it was pouring rain. It was cold. But, he let me finish the event. And to me, that's what being inclusive and finishing and what it's about. So I said, I'm going to have this event regardless. So for 2021, how I was able to do what I did is with, like you mentioned earlier, this donation thing. I said, you know what, I've got to get the attention of folks, because I don't have the support of the bike industry, and I don't have name recognition, and I certainly don't have, experience. I've never done this before. So how do we capture attention? We're going to do this for free. It's going to be a free event. And first thing I said, all right, this event is going to have 1,200 free registrations. And what you're going to do is, it's up to you to make a donation, a direct donation to the volunteer fire department. Most folks are used to paying $100 something, $200 or more for an event like of this caliber. Remember, you have all these aid stations. So you're getting 20 something pros, top level pros from around the world. You're getting over 5 aid stations fully stocked, 20 something SAG vehicles, portable bathrooms at all aid stations. You're getting a drawstring swag bag, really nice. You're getting with zipper. You're getting really nice t-shirts. You're getting Purist water bottles from Specialized. You're getting all this swag, all this stuff for free. So whether you give the fire station $1 or $0, you're going to get everything for free. So it was an honor system. And really, I think that showed people that, hey, this is an event that has Lawrence Tendam, Ted King, Peter Stettner, Allison Tetrick, Jess Sarah, Colin Strickland, all these names that are all of them are going to be at Unbound. All of them are all these huge events, and there's no cutoff. There's all of this support that you don't get at these big events, as far as aid stations, and it is entirely up to me to decide how much I'm willing to pay, what I think it's worth. Well, out of those 1,200 free registrations, less than 400 people donated anything, so that was a bit of a shock. But we still had the event, and
Yeah, and just to unpack that a little bit, quite disappointing, obviously, that just like sort of the percentage of people that actually donated. And to put a finer point on it, like as you described all the things that one would get for participating, you're talking about $100 worth of effort per rider
yes,
to give them nutrition, to provide them porta potties, to give them swag, all those things. So it's a big proposition that I think often gets lost, and you put it in the proper context in that without someone supporting you, without a nutrition sponsor coming in and dumping tens of thousands of dollars worth of product on your tables, like that's coming out of your pocket as the race organizer, and there's no way around that. So pretty incredible effort to get it off the ground. And sorry to hear that the donations were not as great as you wanted them to be, but with those donations, something great did materialize for the
yes.
fire department.
Yeah, and that side didn't happen the way that I had hoped, but we don't really even think about it, because at the end of the day, there were so many articles written about the event that I never expected in a million years. I honestly never thought that GCN would write about it, that Bicycling Magazine would write about it, that Cycling News, the Velo News, all these publications wrote about it. It was listed as Bicycling Magazine listed it as a top 20 bucket list event.
Yeah.
It was mentioned like 17 times in Velo News. GCN mentioned it. Cycling News had articles about it. These are all things that I never even considered would happen.
Yeah. It was absolutely incredible the reach the brand and the event got in that first year. It was incredible,
we got a
Fabian.
smoking great deal on the fire truck. We were still able to buy it with the money that we raised. We still had great registration numbers. And then for 2022, we have over 1,500 people registered, and we raised enough to build a bigger fire station. So
that's
while
huge.
maybe, less than 400 people register out of 1,200, it doesn't matter to me, because we still accomplished everything that we set out to do. We still got more numbers than I ever thought were going to happen. And as a result, we have interest from other cities that are contacting me that want to have events. So, I was several cities reached out to me. Hey, can you do the same at our city? And it is, I've had to turn down cities because it's just too much. I've had two other Texas cities that asked me to host events at their cities, and unfortunately I've had to say no, because I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
And Pueblo reached out against my better judgment. I was like, sure. It's the Pueblo story. I really, I couldn't say no. It's just they've been wanting to do an event there, and they were bidding to try and get an event, and they lost the bidding. Most cities that want to do something like this, they're paying promoters to do the events there. That's one of my rules. I will not charge a city to host an event, because it goes completely against what I'm trying to do. So what I'm trying to do is bring money to the city and build and bring equipment and funding to the volunteer fire departments. So why would I be charging them money to host events?
Yeah, it's super interesting when you look at the economics of events,
yes,
just events in general, how much they cost, but the economic impact to these rural communities, which in your case is very specific to raising money for these volunteer fire departments. But even beyond that, the amount of meals purchased, the amount of hotel nights,
yes.
etc. Like it has a significant impact. And I'm super interested to get into your second event in Pueblo and learn how that happened. But one more question, just out of my own curiosity, how did you end up getting those 20 to 30 pros to come to a first year event?
I would say the credit to that goes to Ted King, because I reached out to several pros. First was him via Instagram. Again, I don't have any connections, or I don't really know anybody. And he was the only person that responded. And I wrote him this long thing through Instagram, direct messaging through Instagram. And I explained to him, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm going to have this event, and it's going to be free to everybody. and it's going to be up to them to donate. And this is all that they're going to get. And this is all I'm going to give them. And this is what I'm trying to buy, a fire truck for the fire department. And I'm trying to get this many pros. And he writes back, he's like, are you nuts? And he finally calls me. He's like, are you nuts? He's like, I'm so intrigued by this. And he really,
the idea was so crazy, he had to call and talk to the guy behind it.
that's exactly what he said. He's like, this is absolutely insane. And this, but I'm so like intrigued by this. And he's like, are you really going to do this? And I said, oh yeah, I'm really going to do this. And he's like, this is how stuff gets done. When people just take a chance and do something completely outside of the box. And he said, can I have 2 weeks to think about this? And I said, absolutely. Just take your time. And he did. 2 weeks later, he calls me back, and I'm like a huge fan of Ted. And I remember watching him in the Tour de France and all that. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, he calls me back. He's like, all right, I'm in. And he's like, do you have a website? No. You need a website. And then he's like, what are you going to do for registration? I don't know. I mean, he just went down this list. He's like, you got to have registration. You got to have this. And then he says to me, and your social media posts suck. And he just starts helping me. He starts giving me so much guidance and stuff like that. And he's like, and how are you going to get a hold of all these other riders? Because I give him a list. Like, I want to get a hold of all these other riders. And he's like, I don't know. He says that, let me help you. So he started really vouching for me and contacting them. And then he gave me a lot of advice. He says, don't give money. Don't do a purse. Don't do this and don't do that. And you're going to find that the folks that believe in what you're trying to do are going to jump on board. And that's how it happened. The folks that came forward are folks that care about what I was trying to do and really wanted to be a part of something totally different that was more about giving back to communities and not so much about, a big corporate event. It was more of a grassroots type thing. They were just interested. And a lot of them have their own events that are grassroots focused. Ted, Jess, Sarah, Sam Boardman, Laura King, and Ted. All of them. Orange Ten Dam has his own events in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Peter Detna has his own event. So all of them, there's a connection amongst all of us that have to do with our own little small events. They're not corporate. They're just small community type events.
Yeah. Amazing
And then
turnout.
what I do in return is, I help with the hotels and things like that and meals and stuff like, that's what we do. They ride for a living. That's how they make a living. So you certainly have to help out in some way, and, when with Hico helps me out with the hotel costs. So I provide them with a room and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Interesting. So now let's shift gears to Pueblo. I know you had mentioned you had a number of rural communities see what you had done and reach out to you, but what was it about going to Pueblo in a state that you don't reside and you don't have property at this point? What was it about the Pueblo opportunity that said, hey, this is the right next step for the Gravel Locos event team?
Well, I found out that they've been wanting to have a gravel event, and I found out that they had been bidding on having an event hosted there, and they lost. Somebody else got the bid, and that kind of bugged me. It bugs me that these small towns that are hurting economically, and they're trying to bring business and they're trying to bring funds to their towns, that they're trying to get events by paying promoters and paying corporations money or offering to pay money so that events are being hosted there. And to me, that it just doesn't make sense, because if you're doing it for as a business, you're making money. If you're hosting an event somewhere, you're going to make money from registration. You're going to make money from sales of shirts, and you're making money from vendors and the bike industry is paying you and all this stuff that I don't have access to, because I don't have any, I don't have the bike industry behind me or any of that. But the lifetime events and the big corporate events have all of that. All those, Shimano and Specialized and Trek and all those companies that are not there for free. Let's just be honest. I was born at night, but not last night. So, and then to have these small towns that are struggling financially and have high unemployment paying significant amount of money for them to host the event there, to me that just seemed wrong. And as a result, they were outbidded by another town and they didn't get the event. And I learned about this and I said, all right, we'll do the event there. So I met with the city, I met with the mayor, and one of the questions were, well, how much are you going to charge us to do the event here? I said, zero. And I said, if I ever ask you for money to do an event here, kick me in the ass, please. I said, that goes completely against what I'm trying to do. I said, the reason I'm doing these events is to bring funds to cities that are struggling financially, but also to bring funds to the volunteer fire department, because guess who we call when we fall and wipe out and bust our asses out riding gravel? Volunteer fire departments. Guess who's out there? That's who's out there. You know, when we're out there riding gravel, that, and all of us know this, it's volunteer fire departments. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and it's a volunteer fire department that is out there charged and really taking care of hundreds of miles that they're covering. And that's who we rely on. So if we're going to support a department as a gravel community, I mean, I would think that logically we're going to support the volunteer fire departments in those areas that we ride. So it's not that I'm Mr. Nice or anything like that. It's just logical that we're going to support the very same people that come to help us. And it's the volunteer fire departments in those areas that we ride. So, and I think they appreciate that, so to charge them, it doesn't make sense. I don't think it's fair, but they do help. Yeah, they provide, like we said earlier, they help me with the permitting, and they help me with law enforcement, and they help me with barricades and things like that. So they do help. It's not like they're doing nothing. So it becomes a community, a true community involved event. And we get that, we throw that word around all the time, community this, community that, but when you really dig into it, the poor community is paying a few $100,000, and it's really no longer a community. Now we're talking about a service and the fees and stuff like that. But in our case, Hico provides all this help and volunteers and stuff like that. The same with Pueblo.
I think I think it's refreshing to take that expansive view of community, because oftentimes in the gravel community, those words are thrown around a lot, generally implying your fellow athletes, the fellow people out there riding with you. But it really is, in these rural communities, it's the people of the community that are coming out, whether they're, manning the registration booth or manning an aid station, or, opening their doors and giving you a glass of water if you're stuck out there somewhere. Like that really is the breadth of the community that gravel does touch in these towns.
Oh, I mean, you better believe it. If they don't help me, I'm not doing it. I mean, there's no way I would do it. It's just, I wouldn't do it. And they understand that. And I'm really open about that. It's like, I'm not charging you anything, but you got to help me. When I met with the fire department, it's like, you all got to help me. There's, I don't have, this is, and I say this, like my social media, it's one Cuban and an iPhone. I don't have a crew or anything like that. It's, what you see on social media, it's Fabian, one Cuban and an iPhone. I don't have OEs. I don't have anything. It's just myself. So I will take all the help that I can get. And you don't need an entire staff to do anything like this, but you do need, help and volunteers, and Pueblo understands that, and Hico understands that. I'm looking at another state right now, and we're looking at a third event, and they understand the same thing, that, hey, we want to have an event, a Gravel Locos type event. We don't have, a few $100,000 to give a promoter to bring the event here, but we do have willing bodies and people that are willing to, help and volunteer. And that's the model. But we also like having 20 something pros, and we like having that racing component, but yet we also want to have an environment that the Fabians that are going to come in last know that they can train for this, and it's not going to be taken away. They're not going to be turned around and yanked off the course. Because to me, I can't imagine training for something for a year and, not being a Ted King or a Allison Tetrick or a Jess Sarah. I'm not those folks. And I can't imagine training and having my family behind me and all that support and the struggles of having to work other jobs, and then being yanked off the course and told, hey, you can't finish because you didn't make it by 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. I cannot imagine what that feels like.
Yeah.
And to me, that's not inclusive. That's just telling somebody you're not good enough and turn around. To me, there's no explanation that you can give me that tells me that's rational, reasonable. Not even safety. What do you mean safety? There's nothing. If it's a safety issue, then guess what? The amount of money that these events make, then you plant the frickin' SAG vehicle behind those folks to follow them till the end. What does that cost? I mean,
Right.
let me know. I'll pay for it. What's the big deal? And that's what we do. At Gravel Locos last year, we had a vehicle, SAG vehicle, to follow 5 folks because it was dark. They didn't have lights. I said, well, you freaking follow them. Follow them all the way to the end. You're going to be their light. Because, again, why would we yank somebody off the course? Now, if they want to quit, it's on them. If they want to throw in the towel, it's on them. But, and then the other thing that we have with our pros, and they're more, and we don't even have to ask them. And it's like, hey, make yourself available to the folks, to the regular folks. And they do. There's so many selfies out there with Ted and kids and Pete Lawrence. It's just super cool and funny as hell. Ali, Tetrick, and Jess, all these young girls and folks that got to meet them personally, and they were out there available to all these folks, which, those are memories and things that you just, all their fans get to meet them.
100%. Yeah. So I guess I feel like we've unpacked pretty completely what the Gravel Locos ethos is and what the experience is going to be like. On the Pueblo side, what is that terrain like? I've driven through Pueblo, but I've never put rubber on the roads and trails there. What do you expect the courses to be like in Pueblo?
Oh my gosh, it's silky smooth, but it's so beautiful. I got to ride 23, 24 miles the other day. So we rode from the fire station. We did a loop, and it was about 24 miles and about 1,400 feet of elevation gain. The main route, we call it the GL 150. That's just the big route is always going to be called the Gravel Locos 150, but it's really 169 miles. So wow. you get a little extra, but it's Ride with GPS says it's over 13,000 miles, but as we know, it's always more
13,000 feet of climbing.
So I would expect just about 14,000 feet of elevation gain. And, it's for me coming from Texas, it was a little harder because there's that whole, the altitude, but it's just so smooth and so nice. It's, it's hard packed also, but it's smoother. The gravel there it's just hard to explain. It's beautiful.
So do you imagine this being the type of event that larger groups can stay together and benefit from drafting off one another and things like that, just given the type of terrain you're on?
Yeah. It's just, it's hard to explain. I was telling them over there, it's like, it's hard and it's definitely challenging, but you're looking at mountains and you're looking at all this beautiful terrain. It's really, I was exhausted. Again, I'm not anybody who's in the kind of shape, and certainly I've gained. I was telling them the other day, I was like, there was the COVID-19 pounds. I managed to, I went from riding a ton of miles every year, and when I started Gravel Locos, I've gained 50 pounds in 2 years of not riding and running 2 businesses and Gravel Locos. So I've got to find a way to get these 50 pounds off. So yeah, going downhill was great over there, but going up was tough. But just the scenery is just so interesting.
And are the courses punctuated by like significant climbs, like in terms of like, oh, you're going to be climbing for an hour at a time, like Colorado's known for?
They're gradual climbs. There was nothing that, like in Hico, you get these punchy climbs. Over there's more gradual. So, you can get away with less big gear. In Hico, I tend to run bigger gears. Over there, I didn't get in any of my big gears. I run a 1052 in the rear SRAM, and I wasn't using it over there because they're more of the gradual climbs where you kind of get into a rhythm, and they're kind of, I prefer that, to be honest, that you just kind of get into this groove and you get into this rhythm. Whereas Hico has these, we have some climbs that are 22%, 23, and they're pretty punchy. And we have these 3 climbs that are back to back that we call the 3 Bs. You can decide whatever you want to call those Bs, but bitches, they're rough. And then, man, those kick up into the 22, 23, 24%. And it's, they're kind of loose rocks, and you just kind of got to lean forward and you got to get in that big granny gear and just work your way up. Whereas in Pueblo, I didn't experience anything like that. And most of what's out there is these long, gradual climbs that you kind of get into a rhythm. So
Yeah.
I personally prefer the type of climbing that they have out there in Pueblo, but they're both very, very different type of riding.
And would you change your tire width from Hico to Pueblo? Would you do something a little narrower?
I think that at both you can get away with smaller tires. So I've done Hico with 35 centimeter tires. I've done Hico with 47. I think that in Pueblo, again, we rode Pueblo last week where it had been snowing and it was muddy. But even then, I rode it with 45 centimeters, and there was folks out there riding it with 38s, and they still did just fine. But the Pueblo gravel is much smoother than the Hico, and I can see some folks getting away with, when it's dry, especially in October, getting away with 35s, even some slicks. I can totally.
It's funny. It's so counterintuitive to me. And SBT gravel's the same way. I remember getting like my arm twisted to run 38s, and I was like, "There's no way." Like I'm going to Colorado, and at home I'm all about the 47s here in Marin County because it's so rocky. But sure enough, like I definitely could have ridden that, as they call it, champagne gravel in Colorado.
Yes.
On 38s with absolutely no issue. So it's quite fascinating to me. And
yeah,
one of the things
kind of racers recently that are 43s. I haven't put them on yet, but they're kind of, they're not flicks, but they're not knobbies. And I can't wait to try something like that. They're 43s. And normally in Hico, I run 45s or 47s, but I'm looking forward to running those 43s as a whole new tire I've never used before. But I can certainly see in Pueblo getting away with 38s, even a slick or a semi-slick.
Yeah. So interesting. It's obviously it's like it's a never ending debate and discussion about which tires to use. And I remember reading, when we're recording, it's the weekend of Mid-South, and there's a lot of people twisting their arms and getting all twisted inside about what tires they're going to run tomorrow or today, on race day at Mid-South. So always fun, and appreciate the insight there. So for people looking to find out more information about the events, where can they find information about Gravel Locos? Why don't you tell us the website and the dates of the events this year?
So Hico is May 14th, and Pueblo is October the 1st. You can sign up on our website, which is www.gravellocos.bike. Just make sure you click the link for one or the other, or if you want to do both. I've left Hico still open, but we've got over 1,500. I haven't decided where we want to shut it down, because Hico is open to having more. Pueblo's still open as well, but just all the information is on there. There's 4 routes for each. So there's the Gravel Locos 30, the 60, the 100, and the 150. Information about the routes is on both of them. The cause for each of the events is always going to be a volunteer fire department. Pretty much everything you need to know about it is on the website.
Great.
You'll find all the different pros that are going to be there. We've got more pros to add to the website every day. We get new pros that want to come on board. As far as our sponsors, there aren't that many of them, but the ones that are on there, you'll find out that these are folks that have been very loyal since the beginning. And
amazing.
If somebody wants to be a sponsor, they're more welcome to send us a message or email us. But we're pretty much self-supported, and really it's just a community thing. And it's really, this whole entire thing has been made possible by the towns and little businesses within the towns. Very small involvement from the bike industry. It's been a community thing, to be honest. Just kind of how it worked out.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for putting so much of your heart out there and making events that you wanted to see happen in the world. And I think it's such a sort of beneficial place for the gravel cycling community to have event organizers with that orientation. And from this conversation and our earlier conversations, I know how much of yourself, both personally and financially, you put on the line to create this event series. So again, from me, thank you for doing that, and exciting to hear that Pueblo is going off this year, and exciting to hear that yet another community has come to you and talking about, like, how do we have Gravel Locos 3?
Yes. We'll release that soon. I'll let you know.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Fabian.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you so much for having.
That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Gravel Ride podcast. Huge thanks to Fabian, not only for joining us on the show, but for everything he's doing around the Gravel Locos series. I think he's got his heart in the right place, and I have no doubt these are some of the best gravel events out there to attend. Big thanks also to our friends at Hammerhead for sponsoring the show. Remember, you can get a free custom color kit and premium water bottle with the purchase of the new Hammerhead Karoo 2 computer. Simply go to hammerhead.io and use the promo code TheGravelRide. If you are interested in supporting the show, ratings and reviews are hugely helpful, as is sharing the show with other gravel cyclists. If you're able to support the show financially, simply visit buymeacoffee.com/thegravelride. Until next time, here's to finding some dirt under your wheels.